Hi again, everyone. I'm Ollie Matthews. This is the Narcissistic Resistance, and this resistance video is sponsored by contribution from Anonymous, and here's our story. Hi, Ollie. Thank you for your insight during our Skype on Friday night to talk about my father, the head narc, and the financial abuse, scapegoating, never-ending punishment of me. Despite the fact that last week I had turned 52 years old and had a successful 25-year career in journalism that eventually took me to Paris 15 years ago, where I got a job with the English language financial press and now work as a freelance writer and translator from my home in the south of France. Today I want to talk about my mother, who just silently slinked out of the room each time I was getting beaten by my dad, and how she continues to torment me with negative comments, criticism, and projecting her own fears and anxiety onto me all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. These shocking realizations started last Christmas when I flew to Miami to spend time with my father, and then took Amtrak to the other coast of Florida where my mother lives, each of them having retired after their divorce and living an hour apart, and living in about an hour apart in Ohio. My dad remarried, my mother has not. One night during this holiday, I had just finished my dinner and my dad was ordering his diabetic chocolate cake, so I took the opportunity to step out and have a smoke before going to his retirement community Christmas concert at 8 p.m. My dad glared at me, and I just asked him to please have a seat and just asked him to please have a seat next to him and his wife, and I would quietly slide in if they arrived at the concert before I came back. I knew I had at least 10 minutes. Also, I had to use the bathroom before the show. Well, when I came back indoors, my dad was furiously pacing around the lobby looking for me. He had led his wife, who had dementia, all alone upstairs in the concert room, which hadn't even started. Huge sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach when I saw the look on his face. I said, "Hey, let's go." And we started walking upstairs. He turned around and literally growled at me, "You just don't understand," and he scared me to death. I had vivid flashbacks of him kicking me down the stairs when I was 8 or 9. This was his punishment for not raking all the leaves in our gigantic yard in Ohio, with dozens of maple, elm, and oak trees dropping enough leaves to fill at least a dozen jumbo trash bags. For some reason, this yard work was not a shared task for my brother and sister. The day before, my father told me to clean up the entire yard all by myself. This was easily 4 or 5 hours of hard labor. When he came home from work that night, he looked out the sliding glass door of our family room and said, You didn't rake the leaves, did you?" I mumbled, "Yes, I did," and he shouted, "Don't story me. You get out there and you do it now." It was a school day. I remember that clearly. I had only a couple hours to myself after coming home from school before he showed up for inspection. Since it was a cold autumn evening in Ohio, I said I needed to go up to my room and get a sweater, and then would go outside and get to work right away. I know I was no more than 8 or 9, because I remember exactly where my bed was in relation to my sister's bed, and mine was next to the closet and the door. My sister moved into my mom's sewing room a year or 2 later, and we all moved out of that house after my dad left when I was 13. Well, once I got in my room, I picked up one of the school books I had left lying on my bed and started reading it, as a child will do, especially one who's a straight-A student. My father always stressed good grades and forced me to be an overachiever, but kind of in a bad way, like Michael Jackson's dad. I always loved to read. My school teachers brought in their own books from home for me to read, since I was far ahead of the rest of my class, and they were afraid I would be bored with the regular curriculum. So there I am, lost in my book, and perhaps 10 minutes later, my dad comes barging through my bedroom door, shouting at me for not getting out downstairs and outside right away. He flipped me over on the bed, pulled my pants down to my bare, naked little ass, and started smacking me so hard I was screaming in pain. Then he grabbed me by my arm and pulled me out the doorway. My room was right at the top of the stairs. He gave me a forceful kick and sent me hurling down the stairs. I remember flying through the air and grabbing and desperately clutching to the white wooden railing on the right-hand side to try to break my fall. If I had not been able to grab onto that railing in time, I am absolutely sure I would have landed in a heap at the foot of the stairs with broken bones. When I think about that happening, even now more than 40 years later, I know I would feel better about the whole thing, even if he had pushed me using his hand or elbowed me or shoved. But I get kicked like that with his foot. Really, it's the worst imaginable thing. Like I was garbage. Yeah, my father was a kicker too. Once my dad broke his wooden fraternity paddle when spanking my brother. That shows you how violent. Oh, he's a fraternity fucking bro. Oh, of course he is. He's a fucking fraternity douche. That figures. And he kept his fraternity paddle. What a pussy. What a fucking pussy child. Fraternity paddle. Fucking gay feelings much, dude? Spanking other dudes? You fucking... Another borderline. Borderlines are always the most violent. My earliest memory of my father's abuse is when I came home from school with a note on my paper from my teacher stating I didn't write the number 6 correctly, and he flew into a rage. So this must have been from the 2nd grade, which is when we moved into that house. That means 7 or 8 based on Google search and the age of the children in the 2nd grade in the United States. Well, my dad told me to go to my room, and don't even think about coming out again until I had written 100 perfect number 6s, and remember sitting at my little desk, shaking and crying. To write 100 anything might as well have been 1,000,000 to my child's brain. He never showed me how to write the 6, just sent me up there, and I was sure I would miss dinner, and he'd probably be stuck in my room for 2 to 3 days, just crying in fear. So it's pretty sure he had started hitting me prior to age 7 to induce this kind of fear in me. Again, when I was about 7 or 8, Mom had made breakfast and the whole family was seated at the table, so it had to be a Saturday or Sunday, a relaxing weekend morning at home. But it all went straight to hell when I refused to eat the scrambled eggs on my plate because they were yucky. Immediately, my dad yanked me from the table and was holding me and hitting me on the butt, back, and legs. There were bruises for days afterward. In front of the kitchen sink under the open window, since it was summertime and me screaming so loud, I could not believe the marshals or our neighbors who lived far across the way could not hear my cries for help. And where was my mother when all this was going on? Leaving the table where my brother and sister still sat, silently shirking out of the room. She never once intervened, told my dad to stop, or come to comfort me after the beatings. She just disappeared. Ollie, since I start binge watching your videos in January after the Christmas trip, you forced me to confront some awful truths about my family and myself. Why I self-sabotage all the time. Why I have the worthless tapes running in my head. Why I suddenly feel a very unsettling onset of anxiety, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, when relaxing, reading a book, and all is calm and quiet, not to mention why I hate scrambled eggs. To fully understand my story, you should know 2018 follows an intensive period of serious healing work and learning to regulate my emotions with a therapist who helped me recover from extreme PTSD because I was a victim of the July 14th, 2016 Nice terrorist truck attack. The one where the terrorists drove a 19-ton cargo truck for more than 2 miles down the Promenade d'Angelus into crowds gathered to watch the annual fireworks. The toll was 86 dead and more than 600 injured. It devastated our beautiful little seaside community. As a side note, Ollie, let me tell you that I voted for Trump because during his campaign he mentioned the Nice attack in nearly every speech. From that's not very nice to his talk about protecting borders instead of like European government that just pretend that all these terrorist attacks never happened, still makes me furious. After all that, in 2017, I received compensation from the French Fonds de Granite to make up for the months where I could not work and being far too afraid to go outside my apartment other than to the corner to buy a baguette or cigarettes. Silly me. When I received the payment, the first thing I wanted to do with the money was travel back to the United States and spend a warm and happy Christmas with my family. I had thought about them and missed them so much, but they never really even called or reached out to me in the aftermath. I struggled through this one alone, except I have a lot of friends here and I got incredible help from the trauma therapist. My dad's abuse has always been easy to see, but this letter is about my mother who denies what happened. Well, that's why she left. So she has plausible... I never saw that. Of course you did. You ran and buried your fucking head in the sand. See, the enabler wants to bury their head in the sand and then deny it ever fucking happened, which makes them actually covert narcissists to begin with, which is what I say. The enabler is always, to me, is always the covert narcissist. Always. It's easy to spot your father. It's easy. She said she never had a hard enough time getting over. She had a hard enough time getting over her marriage to my dad and her own memories. Refuses to talk about the past and chirps. Think positive and worse. You just need to move on. Right. My mother is an unrelenting source of guilt, and shame. Last Christmas, apropos of nothing, my mom brought up how when I was 14 or 15 years old, she caught me giving away her mirror stashed in the hall closet to my best friend. We must have been trying out makeup. And my friend said she didn't have a mirror in her bedroom. And I was like, oh, here, we have one in the closet. You can take this and use it until your mom gets you one. This mirror had been hanging in our large house where we lived when my dad was still around. And we had since moved into a much smaller house. The damn thing had been stashed in storage for at least 4 or 5 years at that point. Another evening, my mom spent an hour telling me her favorite story, how I was such an awful teenager that I terrorized my older sister to the point that she was forced to leave home at 18 and join the Air Force. It was all my fault. After I started learning about narcissism in January, my mom flew into my newfound narc radar in March when I went to London and emailed her a photo of fish and chips from an award-winning restaurant. She wrote back, "Your dinner looks disgusting." In April, I was back in London to attend an all-day course for prospective veterinary nursing students. More than 100 people applied and only 30 were selected to attend a very prestigious university. I was very lucky to be chosen and thrilled to be among them. In a little workshop to break up the day of lectures, we had learned to bandage a dog's paw using 5 different layers of materials and wrapping it in a very complex way so the dog could not take the bandage off by himself. I sent the attached photo of me smiling, holding up a stuffed dog with his paw bandaged to my mother. She wrote back, "Hi, I'm happy to know you can fix stuffed animals now. Maybe you can fix my doll's eyes too. Thanks for your updates on your travels, Mom." She's a covert narcissist. She's a covert narc. She hates you. She's in competition with you. She buried her head in the sand while you were getting beat and then denies your abuse. I got really angry at her and said the day represented a hell of a lot more than playing with stuffed animals, and how a few months prior to that I had visited Open Day, one of the best schools of veterinary medicine in Europe, and they had a whole room full of stuffed animals for students to practice on. Since I have gone very, very low contact with my mother as opposed to sending her photos every week of what I'm up to, oh, how bad the memories have come flooding back. I found the worst reminder of how vicious my mother can be in the following email she sent me about 7 years ago, trying to convince me to have an abortion. Subject line, check Google search. Do a Google search of pregnancy risks for women over 40. There are several risks, including increase in genetic defects as Down syndrome. Read these articles. Your doctor should advise you as well. Think about it. This was not planned. You don't have enough income to support a baby. You will lose all your freedom to go out with your friends as you do, even to sleep late in the morning. I think you are ignoring what this would do to your life. She's talking to you like you're a child in school. She's talking to you like you're a high school student. She's trying to sabotage you. Now, on the other hand, you have to add, and I told you this over Skype, you have to ask yourself if you're acting like a child with all this school and never wanting to take the next step in your maturity. You have to make sure you're not playing her game subconsciously. The woman with 14 kids was on Good Morning America today. She has 4 to 5 women to help her 3 days, to help her days and all 3 at night. Babies are very demanding and take a full attention. I also think the father may have legal rights on where the baby lives. You need to find out now and tell him you're pregnant. Will he support it? I'm sure the answer is no. Talk to you soon. Love, Mom. Love, huh? Wow. What a beast. What a beast. She doesn't even know anything about my boyfriend. She doesn't even know his name. She assumes I'm going to bring the baby back to the United States by myself and get caught up in some horrific legal battle, projecting all kinds of fears and nauseating anxiety onto me. She thinks I cannot get out of bed in the morning to take care of a baby. She wants me to go and get an abortion. The bitch. Ali had a miscarriage and lost this baby. Even more heartbreaking because I started bleeding and was sure I had lost the baby. So my doctor sent me for an ultrasound, more as a health checkup than anything else. 2 weeks later, and the baby was still in there, thriving. I saw him. He was developing normally, and I listened to his little heart beating. I was overjoyed. But a month later, it happened again. My boyfriend took me to a special OBGYN emergency room in Paris and stayed with me. The doctors had come back in a week, had me come back in a week for a follow-up visit and gave me the all clear. You're perfectly fine. Go out and get pregnant again right away. You can do it as soon as you want. But it didn't. But I didn't go out and get pregnant again because of all the self-doubt and self-loathing instilled by my mother. How I didn't have enough money to bring a child on my own. And now it's too late. I'm too old. I'm heartbroken and full of regrets. About a month ago, I confronted my mother about this email and got no response. Over the weekend, I confronted her over the telephone, and you should have heard the gaslighting. Should have recorded it. I don't want to talk about the past. This is not about the past. This is about when I lived in Paris just a few years ago. I'm 78 years old. Well, you were not 78 when you wrote this, and what does age have to do with anything? Yeah. So you were still, what, in your 60s when you told me to have an abortion? You fucking cunt. I didn't know you were pregnant when I sent that to you. What? Oh, this is what I'm talking about. Head in the sand, and they can deny and lie about anything. They deliberately bury their head in their sand, and then they lie about it. How the hell would you not know? I called you and told you about it right away since I trusted you and seek advice. I never wrote that email. I told her I still have it in my Gmail with her name on it and sent it back as proof. Why don't you just delete that email? Why do you keep those awful memories around? You must like to be miserable. Why do you keep the awful memories that I deliberately wrote and sent to you to try to convince you to get an abortion? Why did you keep it around? Because your subconscious kept it around because you knew it was fucked up. How I wish I could have recorded our conversation. Phone call with narcissistic mother, part 2. The way I finally got my mom to admit she wrote the email. after an hour that she is most likely knew I was pregnant when she wrote it, how she always put her own feelings ahead of mine, even when I was growing up. It's just sick, because she's a covert narcissist who hated you the entire time. At the time I received this email, well, no, she's not even. She's drunky the fuck clown. She's borderline. She's borderline when she wants to be. She's covert when she wants to be. At the time I received this email, I was obviously too concerned for my own health and getting ready for a baby to work myself up into a rage to confront my mother. I had totally forgotten about it until just recently. So now, as I accept the reality that I will never have a child of my own, I still look at the news and see celebrities in their mid-40s posing with their smiling mothers, happily anticipating becoming grandmothers. The kicker is that I remember hearing your classic line, my mother telling all three of us kids that we were mistakes, and she did not plan on getting pregnant with anybody from when we were a very young age, maybe even as young as 5 or 6, like before any of us even fully understand what it meant to get pregnant and not the slightest concept of birth control. My mom's health is deteriorating. She sends me emails about her aches and pains, and she won't even take responsibility to get herself to the doctor. Or when she does, it's all complaining about my aunt, sister, won't take a whole day off to drive her anymore. This is what Virginia did. And I would question how sick she is, because the borderline will always play up how sick they are. She's not too sick to email. And then when you take her to the doctor, all she does is bitch at the doctor about her family, to the point where the doctors stopped seeing my grandmother. They stopped seeing her. There's nothing wrong with you, Virginia. At Christmas, I saw my mom's driving is horrific. Seriously, we nearly had a head-on three-way collision looking at Christmas lights on an evening when she was driving on the wrong side of the road. I thought it was a one-way in her neighborhood until the pickup truck on the right-hand lane next to us started honking furiously, and we saw the headlights of the oncoming car. Shit, not only could we have been killed, but she could have killed herself and injured 2 other drivers and their passengers. I tried to line up lessons at a driving school and rides for her for her next driving visits, but she really got angry and refused to go along with the plan. I told her I know she loves her independence and doesn't necessarily have to move, but there won't be any more independence if she ends up with her legs amputated after a car crash. And what if she hurts other people? How can anybody live with that? She can. I tried again with several emails in January and called my sister to let her know how Mom had nearly got us into a head-on three vehicle collision. Well, my sister just went to visit in August, and the topic of driving never came up. But on the phone yesterday, there goes my mom telling me how my aunt once again did not want to drive her around all day, and she finally called a taxi for her last appointment. This was a huge imposition. I sold my car when I left the States almost 20 years ago and never had another one in France. I have repeatedly told my mom taxis are taxis and friends are friends. You don't ask friends to be taxis. To conclude, I desperately need to have the next 5 or 10 years of my life 100% to myself, for myself, guilt-free, to stay focused on making a major career change back to my first love, working with animals, to stay healthy and lose about 15 pounds. I already lost 10 since I signed up with Weight Watchers 1st of September. To hopefully find a life partner with some stability without my family constantly pulling the rug out from under me every time I start to get ahead. I really just want to walk away. To call telecom and ask them to change my phone number into a new unlisted one, and not hate myself for doing it. To be free of all this guilt, forever the scapegoat, and this continues as my mother keeps telling my brother and sister how mean I am to her these days. I asked her to keep our conversations private. She said she did not see any difference between me and telling my friends about what a monster she is and telling my brother and sister about the conflicts. The difference is that one day they are all that I'm going to have left. Since my father has financially otherwise triangulated the three of us, my mother is further poisoning my siblings against me. I don't know if I even have a family or hope left to hold on to. Isn't it time to just walk away? Yeah. Obviously. Your mother has been gaslighting you your entire life. Your entire life. And your relationship with her is nothing more than past abuse and her lying about it. And her slinking away to give her plausible deniability so she can gaslight you later. It's time to walk away. Period. Period. She buried her head in the sand so she could gaslight you later. Period. And I hope that helps. Thank you, Anonymous, for your contribution and your story. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions or advice in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, a narcissist you'd like to expose, you'd like to set up Skype, a phone call, have a private video made, or a Facebook live chat, or you'd like to sponsor a video like this for someone who needs help and can't afford it, or just make a contribution to the channel in general to keep it supported, growing, and successful, because this channel survives 100% on contributions from all of you. Without you guys, all this goes away. So if you like what you see here and you want to see more videos like this, you know what to do with the PayPal and email links in the description box. Also, please like and share this video wherever you can. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and be sure to click the subscription bell to be notified of all my video uploads. I'm Ollie Matthews. This has been the Narcissistic Resistance.